Welcome to the Airline Pilot Podcast. I'm Jason Ambrosi. This episode we're recording from the 2024 Legislative Summit. This event has impeccable timing as it comes on the heels of the House and Senate passing and the President signing into law the FAA reauthorization bill. Let me underscore that the FAA reauthorization was an uphill battle with special interests working hard to undermine our union and air safety. We made it clear to our pilot partisan allies on the Hill that anything compromising aviation safety or impacting your rights to protect your hard-fought collective bargaining agreements would be unacceptable. And with the help of our allies, we not only stopped attempts to weaken safety or our labor rights, we added new tools to make our industry stronger. In this bill, we won. Prohibition on review or recommendations on reduced crew operations in commercial airline pilot operations, preserved robust pilot training and qualifications, a pathway to require secondary barriers for the existing passenger aircraft fleet, and workforce development grants to advance careers in aviation and other provisions to promote aviation as a career for women and veterans, all without making any concessions on safety. None of this would have been possible without the hard work of pilot advocates, and I'd like to thank everyone who took part in this work on behalf of our membership. This significant achievement would also not have been possible without the support and determined work of our elected leaders who championed safety. I'm honored to be joined by one of those leaders, Congressman Nick Langworthy from the 23rd District in New York. Thank you for joining us, Congressman.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate it. You have a long history with aviation safety. You've been a strong partner for ALPA and joined and supported the recognition of the Flight 3407 anniversary that I went to last year in Clarence Center, New York. Would you share with us your history with that flight and aviation safety?
Well, I come to Congress with a passion for aviation safety based on my prior experience. On that fateful night in February of 2009, I was district director to then brand new Congressman Chris Lee, and that crash in Clarence Center that took 50 beautiful lives is seared into my memory and our community's heart forever. And I'm so proud of the work that the families did after that. I mean, the aftermath and attending funerals and getting to know family members in Buffalo is a big small town, so you're only 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from people that are victims of any terrible situation. So I dear friends of mine lost relatives in the crash, and so I come to Congress with the passion of that disaster, even though it predates my time by 15 years. But what those families did, mobilizing and lobbying Congress and working together to change history and change aviation safety by implementing the 1,500 in-seat flight hours for all airlines, I think is something that the entire flying public owes those families a debt of gratitude. And, I'm dedicating my time in Congress to making sure that their work doesn't get undone. And, unfortunately, I had to work very quickly upon being elected myself to work to prevent changes to that important standard from happening.
Yeah, I think we both started in D.C. about the same time, and I was very pleased to learn that you were going to be one of our true champions and be an advocate for aviation safety and fight it with a passion, reductions to our training and qualification standards that have been so successful in the wake of that tragedy.
Well, we are going to have this fight continually going forward, and as technology increases every day, it sounds good on a balance sheet, or it sounds good in theory to use simulator time to train pilots, and there's a role for simulators. I think it can increase abilities, but it shouldn't be at the expense of in-seat time. And as I found very quickly, the chairman of the Transportation Committee was a fierce advocate of simulators taking a bigger role in the education of our pilots. But what I found as I dug deeper is those that we even serve with that are commercial aviators in their previous lives, they were left out of that conversation. And this was being done in a vacuum, and it was being done in a way that was in spite of the families 3407, in spite of the flying public, and I don't believe it would make our skies safer. It certainly wouldn't make our pilots and the personnel of the airline safer, and it certainly wouldn't make the flying public safer. So I went to work, and in that FAA reauthorization, I'm very proud that our amendment to preserve the 1,500-hour in-seat flight training standard, it was the only amendment that was successful. And we built a coalition across the Congress. And as I like to say, when you put together a coalition that includes both Marjorie Taylor Greene and AOC, you've done something special that doesn't happen every day here in Congress. And we were very fortunate to have people on both sides of the aisle to understand our argument, understand why we need to maintain the greatest flying standards in the world. And the best progress report you can give is the fact that we haven't had a commercial aviation disaster since this standard was adopted. So I am very proud that it's in the final product, and I'm very proud to announce that we've created the Aviation Safety Caucus so that we're continually talking about aviation safety, not just at the time of an FAA reauthorization, but in between. And this has got to be a every year conversation. And we need to have, my hope is that this caucus will be a sounding board for the industry, but also for the flying public, to make sure that we're always talking about how to keep our skies safer for travelers and for personnel.
Yes, I was very pleased to learn about your leadership in standing up that Aviation Safety Caucus, something that's likely long overdue and will be well received as we embrace new technology, yet want to make sure we don't move forward too fast with it and keep the safety of the flying and shipping public at number one priority. For our listeners who might not be familiar with how the process works, I know that an FAA reauthorization is a lot of work and it takes a lot of process. Can you explain a little bit about what that's like and what the process is for our listeners?
Well, I was kind of thrown in the deep end of the pool upon my election that, we were right up on a FAA reauthorization. And this seemed to be a predetermined outcome by the chairman of transportation. We weren't warmly received when we offered testimony as to why we need to preserve standards. We were told that the families were overly emotional and that we need to, embrace new technology. And that's where we had to go member to member and build a coalition to maintain these standards. Many people off committee because, as you could imagine, there's members of the Transportation Committee that aren't really eager to cross their committee chair. But we did get several, especially the New Yorkers, that understand the tragedy. They understand the loss of their fellow residents in New York, and building that coalition is important. And every single one of us, one of the most salient arguments where I got people to understand is how many of us that come from smaller markets fly regional carriers each and every week when we kiss our families goodbye to come here to Washington. I do. Many of the others do. And it's so critically important that whether you're flying one of the big carriers or a regional carrier, that you have the peace of mind when you buy that ticket that each and every pilot is trained in the same exact way. And there should not be two standards. Should not be two sets of books. And we need to just make sure that every pilot in America has the gold standard of training. And that is something that we have maintained here. When you have a reauthorization, they could put anything in there, and the amendment process is critical to that. My serving on the Rules Committee helped make this amendment in order, and it is something I'm very proud. It's my greatest accomplishment so far in my time in Congress, and it's one that I'll dedicate my career to.
And it's a big one, so you're going to have a hard time beating your own legacy because you knocked it out of the park with that one, Congressman. as we know, special interests will always be trying to move an economic agenda forward. It's still out there trying to use a charter loophole to try to get around our training and qualification standards that you've spoken so well about. And I look forward to partnering with you and the Aviation Safety Caucus on how we can, between reauthorizations, continue to advance the ball rather than let special interests keep taking us in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. I mean, any carrier that's trying to use a loophole, we're going to fight against. We need to have the utmost care and concern to make sure that the standards of passenger screening and pilot training are at the forefront for every carrier. If you're flying in the United States, our flying public needs to have the peace of mind that that's the safest possible standard that the world can offer. And we have that now. We need to maintain that. And the relationship with ALPA, I think, is one that I treasure deeply. I had a very warm welcome upon announcing for Congress because we had such a common ground once they got to know what I was about and what experience I brought to the table here. And while it wasn't one of the factoring decisions on running for Congress, it's certainly been one that I'm very proud to count among my very top priorities here in the House, and what we can accomplish. This Aviation Safety Caucus, I think, will bring people together across the aisle, but also will keep aviation safety at the forefront of discussions here in the House of Representatives.
Absolutely, and thank you again for speaking to our pilot group that was here this week for our Hill Week in DC. Nothing but excellent feedback on your address, and really appreciate it. Before we call this podcast an episode, as we look ahead, other than just the pilot training and qualification, what else is on your radar as far as aviation safety, and what other priorities outside of that do you have, sir?
Well, I don't believe that we're probably going to see much more legislation in regards, to aviation this year. It's just that we have very few session days left, and it is an election year, and there's those things that we have to accomplish to keep our government functional and operational. We're going to really try to drill in on our appropriations process, so we're going to be watching those very closely to make sure there's no policy changes there. But that's where the caucus is going to come in, because we have now a clearinghouse of influential members, including former commercial pilots. I mean, Jack Bergman, in particular, Jake Elzy, who's a great friend, and a great friend to have here is someone from the industry, in making sure that their voices are loud and clear on all matters aviation.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for all of your hard work to defend safety, Representative Langworthy. ALPA has been advocating for safety for almost a century, and with every step we take, we're building a system that is safer and stronger. For almost 15 years, we've benefited from the safest period in aviation history. I think some people can lose track of how far we've come and become more willing to take steps backwards, as you discussed. But because of aviation safety leaders like you who have fought back, aviation is still the safest form of transportation. Thank you for your hard work on this, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. And if you enjoyed this episode, let your fellow crew members know about the show. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, reach out to podcast@alpa.org. To listen and subscribe to the Airline Pilot Podcast, or learn more about ALPA, check us out online at alpa.org, or find us on all major podcast platforms. Until next time, this is the Airline Pilot Podcast, production copyright ALPA 2024, all rights reserved. Thanks, and have a safe flight.